Hello, you're listening to I Taught English Abroad. Now, just to make things a little bit different, we're going to end the series with a recap episode. And I thought, who better to ask than the very person that's their dulcet tones you might know from the adverts. There's someone that helps me to no end with the making and producing of this podcast. It's TEFL Org's very own Erin MacKenzie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on for my first ever podcast.
Yeah, I promise it's going to be painless. A lot of people that have done their first podcast recording with me and seemed, their life seemed to be okay after that. So I can only hope that's the same for you. So Erin, for anyone who doesn't know, what's your history with the TEFL Org?
Yeah, so I'm the content marketing manager here. I've been with the company full-time for about 6 years now, almost 6 years. But I've kind of got a bit of a long history. So I first started working for the TEFL Org back in 2010 when I was in my final year of high school. And back then, the company was actually called TEFL Scotland. Actually operated under a few names. So we had TEFL Scotland, TEFL England, TEFL Ireland, and TEFL Wales as well. And I guess as the company grew and we had kind of global ambitions, it would have got a bit out of hand to have names for every single country we were selling courses in. So I worked doing kind of admin stuff, bits and pieces after school for a while, then went off to university, and then 6 years ago ended up working full-time for them, and that's where I've been ever since.
So what did you know about the TEFL industry before you became part of it? Because we'll talk a bit in a little while about kind of preconceived notions that people have about teaching English abroad. What were your impressions of it?
You know what, I don't actually know if I knew much about it at all before I started, and to be honest, even when I did start, I didn't. I remember a friend of mine in school told me that the company she was working for were looking for someone else. And she gave me Joe Hallwood's number to phone, and she just said it was TEFL, didn't tell me anything more. And I honestly thought it was like the pan company, TEFL. I was like, I have no idea what this is, but I hate my job working in a cafe. Anything's got to be better. So I phoned up Joe and quickly realised that no, they don't sell pans. Very little knowledge to begin with.
I had that same thing with TEFL or whatever. I can't remember which relative it was, but I told them about it, and they were just like, "Oh, is that the non-stick?" And I was like, yeah, sure.
It's reassuring to know what happens to other people.
If there are any representatives of the TEFL company listening, then feel free to get in touch. We could all use pans. I guess my own, thanks for asking, but my own preconceived notions were, obviously I knew a little bit about it in terms of I knew people who'd gone out and taught English abroad. One of my partner's relatives went out and taught in, I think, Vietnam, and then fell in love with the local food so much that they ended up getting into the restaurant business over there and that kind of thing. It's crazy what can happen, but I guess I didn't think it was something that I could have ever done. There's certainly, I think nowadays if I was coming through high school and university, I would know a lot more about it. It's much more, because of organisations like the TEFL Org, there's a lot more in the public consciousness now, but I definitely would have seen it as a kind of student-y gap year thing. I certainly didn't think it was something that people would make a career out of or necessarily change careers to go into. And there are lots of experiences in this podcast series, tackle all these misconceptions, and we'll definitely get more into them. So one of the things I took away, Erin, was from this series anyway, was there was so many different reasons as to why people get into TEFL. So you've got Carl, who he from the school days wanted to explore the world. Didn't really have any particular locations in mind as such, but was definitely into the idea of moving around and teaching English in all kinds of different places, just opening yourself up to that kind of experience. And then there's a sort of circumstantial, Arthur, who had done a bit of teaching and then sort of looked for opportunities to get out of, it would have been Portland at that time during the global banking crisis in 2008. And then of course you got, Ellie Rayner, who was working on cruise ships until COVID hit. We'll see with COVID that so many new teachers who will say, during lockdown, I took this up and it ended up being a thing. What do you think of that? Is that, are you seeing that based on the kind of interactions that you have and the kind of, how the business has been going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when COVID hit, we saw such a spike in interest and yeah, huge spike in course sales, which made a lot of sense because obviously a lot of people lost their jobs, they were furloughed, most of us weren't sure about what the future was going to be like. You know, a lot of people felt kind of insecure about the industries they were in. So, it made a lot of sense that they were looking at TEFL as a new option, especially because, at the time it was mainly online teaching. Obviously, you couldn't go off abroad and TEFL, so teaching abroad industry obviously took a huge hit, but the online industry was booming. There was such a demand and so many people getting into it, either because they, needed a new full-time job or they just wanted some additional income. So yeah, it was really interesting at that time. It was like the busiest, I guess, we've been. And yeah, it was really interesting to hear Ellie's story, to actually hear from one of those people who was interested in TEFL, who took their course during COVID and is now actually teaching abroad now that the world's opened up a bit.
Well, I think like most people, it was COVID and I was rethinking what I wanted to do with my life. So I had a job before where it was lots of travel and then that stopped. And I was thinking about my future and what I wanted to do and fulfilling dreams that I wanted to do for a long time. And it was just the perfect opportunity. I was at home, the course is online, and I thought, why not? I've got the time and just see what happens. So I decided to sign up to it. And it was great because I can sit at home and do it, and I could do it in my own time. So it was good for me.
Yeah, and the only things I can sort of compare the boom in the TEFL industry to is maybe apparently instrument sales were way up during COVID, so there's probably like a lot of abandoned homemade EPs out there that never saw the light of day, that were people maybe took the wrong path there. They should have got a certificate in TEFL instead.
You know what, there's probably also a lot of COVID podcasts as well. I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. I think I might have done a couple myself, but someone else was hosting them. I can't take full responsibility for that. But it's funny, isn't it, when you tell people you're starting a podcast, especially like, if you don't tell them the context and say like, oh, well, it's associated with my work, we're talking to people from all over the world. I think the word podcast is kind of associated with like chatting to your mates and hoping it's really funny, which I've also done. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that very rarely works out, but it can. I mean, I know someone actually who has a podcast and she's absolutely hilarious. So it just like makes the most sense in the world that she'd do a podcast that would be genuinely enjoyable and funny to listen to. But a lot of people, I guess, think they're maybe themselves and their friends are funnier than they are.
I couldn't possibly comment on that. Talking of having a laugh, was there anything or any episodes in particular in series 2 that really caught you off guard in terms of how kind of funny they were? Because there was a couple of things, especially Sophie's podcast, when she talked about being a Halloween scarer. That was a job I didn't know existed.
So I was working in a family park in Devon, and I got to be a witch, a scarecrow in a maze, and just scare the living daylights out of kids, like mostly big kids in the scarecrow maze, because if they were toddler, I would be in serious trouble. So you have to have big kids, and I would just be I'd be hiding, and I would jump out, and I'd be like, ah!
I mean, we'll get to individual highlights from the episodes later on, but was there anything, like, did you have a favourite episode of this series, for example? Or?
I mean, it feels almost unfair to pick a favourite, but
good answer.
I did really enjoy Carl's episode. I mean, I know Carl, he's been a tutor for, I think, longer than I've been here. And I just think he's got so many interesting stories. He's taught in so many interesting places. And his story about like the Chinese students coming out of their halls of residence to the sound of Celine Dion, I just thought that was like such an amusing picture.
And the first morning that I was there, they played a Celine Dion song, the Titanic one, like a melodic version. It was over and over again in the morning. And I was like, wow, okay, what's that all about? And then all of a sudden, all these students would come streaming out of the front doors of this big tower block, and then they'd lock the doors behind it.
I honestly can't think of anything worse to wake me up. I think I'd prefer a fire alarm to that. I mean, no harm to Big Celine, you know, she seems really cool, but yeah, I don't know if I can handle that. We're just going to take a quick break. You're definitely going to hear Erin's voice again, so lucky for you. And we'll be right back with Erin to discuss our highlights from Series 2.
Feeling inspired? Fancy trying something completely new? Well, make your best move yet by signing up for a TEFL course with the most highly accredited provider on the planet. Here at the TEFL Org, we offer a range of online and classroom courses that you can study at your own pace. All of our courses include top-of-the-range teaching materials and come with dedicated tutor support from experienced and highly qualified TEFL experts. And what's more, we'll give you money off to do it. Just enter the code PODCAST at checkout to get 50% off any of our internationally recognised TEFL courses. And that includes our best-selling 120-hour Premier Online course. With that code, you'll not only get 50% off, but you'll also get a free lesson plans pack. Within a matter of months, you could be a qualified TEFL teacher, out there exploring the world, or working to your own schedule from home as an online English teacher. Just use the code PODCAST at checkout to get started.
Okay, and we're back doing a Series 2 recap. I'm with Erin MacKenzie. So, you know, recording a podcast hasn't been painful so far. I'm sure the rest of it will be fine. I know it's your first, but, you know, hopefully it won't be your last. And in a sense, you've appeared on all these podcasts. I just wanted to ask you just quickly, like, what was it? How did you feel recording the adverts? Because a few people who will remain unnamed because they work with us were saying, oh, you should get Erin to co-host with you, or maybe Erin should do the podcast because her voice is nicer. How did you feel doing those? Was it like kind of awkward, or, you know?
Yeah, it was so awkward. I mean, who likes,
you're good at it.
Who likes listening to their voice back? Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that, you know, I nailed that first time. I don't want to know how many times I re-recorded those. So, yeah.
Well, no, you did a fine job. You did a fine job. And I just hope, you know, no advertisers out there wanting to nab you to do voiceovers. That's kind of the last thing I want. So let's talking of voices and talking of people who are distinctive. Fluency MC opened the series, and I have since learned so much about him. He's just an absolute character. He did mention it on a podcast, but he DJ'd and produced before he was a teacher. And so following on Instagram, he opened for the Beastie Boys in like 1988, I think. So like absolute peak popularity of Beastie Boys. He supported them in Philadelphia, and I was just like what? I did some digging into the stuff that he'd done. You know, he was working for a couple of labels and that kind of thing. It's just like seminal New York hip hop releases he was involved with, and then yeah, it was mad. So
yeah, because I think last year, I remember, I think you wrote an article or a blog post where you'd included Fluency MC or like come across him for the first time. So then when, you know, I'd asked you to look into contributors for this season, it was not surprising in the least that you wanted to reach out to him. So yeah, it was very cool that he was up for it, because I think that was such a fun episode, and you could tell that, you know, you had a lot of fun doing it. So yeah, tell us a bit about, you know, your love of hip hop, and yeah, why he was a fun guy to interview. I
mean, as a white suburbanite in Scotland, you know, it's imperative that I enjoy hip hop to a ridiculous amount. But yeah, I used to. I think my first tape ever was Run DMC versus Jason Nevins. I don't know if you remember the video for that one, but it was like two groups of dancers sort of battling out in a car park.
Vaguely, maybe.
When I was like 5, that was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. So, yeah, I liked hip hop in secret for most of my childhood because it wasn't, it's bizarre saying this, 'cause it's the most popular genre in the world now, but it wasn't cool to like hip hop. It was just a bit kind of strange. Sort of anything that wasn't Stereophonics or Oasis, that kind of stuff was just kind of frowned upon a wee bit. I ended up DJing a hip hop night in Aberdeen, which I imagine sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it was pretty fun. My friend Scott, he now DJs as Home Alone, and he's been on like Sway in the Morning. He's supported Drake, like he's done a bunch of other cool things, and he started around the same time as me, pretty much. So it's kind of fun watching his career just like go into like the stratosphere, and then I sort of gave up after really clumsily trying to mix Sean Paul and Lumidee together. So, yeah, in terms of Fluency MC, like it was really, really cool, because you sort of worry and you think like, oh no, it's a rapping teacher. You sort of half expect it to be someone going like, well, my name's Teacher and I'm here to say, but he's actually like, he's got this legitimate love of like real hip hop, and so it comes from a place of really, really knowing the music. It's not like some fad, and also it's a more endearing story, I think, because he rapped to one of his classes as kind of a fun exercise, and then one of his students films it and says, "Oh, you got to put this on YouTube. You got to put this on YouTube." Yeah, it's just so much fun. And the guy is a blast. Like he's on. I've got him on WhatsApp now. So yeah, he's a great guy. But it's a really good example of building a niche.
Yeah.
You know, that was something that came up quite a lot during the series, because also Carl's carved out a niche as an expert for a specific type of English exam, and you know, there's different things, kind of different contributors they've really sort of made their own lane in terms of TEFL teaching. And that's really hard to do, especially like, you know, Cheryl Obel, who I don't want to say pioneered, but was really influential in this kind of cross-cultural teaching that exists now. So yeah, it's just, in terms of guests, we've been really lucky, I think. And, you know, we've had some industry trailblazers in there, not least Jennifer MacKenzie, who talked to us about being an ambassador for Scottish Women in Business and all this amazing stuff. It's been a really, really varied and exciting listen, I think, this series. But then I would say that.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting as well is, you know, hearing them talk about their beginnings and where they are, because we've had a mix of people who are like you've just mentioned Carl and Jennifer, who's the co-founder of the TEFL Org, and Cheryl, and these are people who've been around for a good amount of time. They've got a lot of experience under their belts, and then we've got the likes of Ellie and Sophie, who are, you know, at the beginnings of their teaching careers, or maybe it won't be a career for them. Maybe they'll go on and do something else. But you just don't know where you're going to end up when you get started. So in terms of building a niche, you might have an idea when you start out, but you don't know really where it's going to go. And it's only by starting and trying different things that, you know, people realize what they're interested in. Or, I mean, with Fluency MC, it was kind of, yeah, like you said, that, you know, that student who filmed him, that's what sparked things. So you just don't know. And I think there's something quite exciting about that.
Are you a fan of hip hop yourself, Erin?
Do you know what? Actually, over the past year, I've maybe got a bit kind of into 90s hip hop, but not in a way I can speak with any authority on it. But like stuff like Souls of Mischief and The Far Side and Public Enemy.
Excellent.
So we talked earlier about your kind of preconceived notions about TEFL. And yeah, I think it'd be good to go into that a little bit more about the misconceptions that are out there. So what would you say is, you know, in this kind of past year that you've been working for the TEFL Org, is the, you know, kind of biggest misconception that you've come across?
I thought you had to do like some kind of big exam, or everyone had to do this sort of same course, and it cost lots and lots of money. And I was half right, because I guess that used to be the case with the CELTA. You know, it did used to be you can only do it in certain places, and, you know, you have to pass this uniform thing. And I guess like we've seen that in some of the examples in terms of, you know, Carl, Melissa, Jennifer, you know, the more kind of experienced TEFL teachers, that was how you did things. But I didn't know the sheer range of courses you could do, what was important in terms of a course, you know, accreditation, tutor support, you know, doing a course with someone that's reputable. I honestly didn't it didn't even occur to me before I joined the industry that there would be sort of, Groupon deals and discount courses and all this kind of shadiness. I guess we could say less reputable sources. But it's kind of fun seeing the sort of experienced versus inexperienced teachers in terms of how things come across. Because I mean, Arthur now, he's someone with an immense amount of experience now, but he would have been coming into the game when things were starting to move from it just being, the CELTA that you had to pass. And of course we got, Ellie and Sophie, who studied with us and have gone on to do really, really incredible things. I mean, they're both in Asia now, in different parts of Asia, kind of fulfilling all these lifelong dreams that they had. So I guess that was kind of one of them. I mean, even in the time that you've been with the, inside the TEFL industry, would you say things have really changed in terms of the public perception about what you need to do to be able to teach English?
Yeah, I think so. I think it can maybe be a bit of a generational thing. So, older teachers who kind of had to do the CELTA, you kind of have either you were a kind of actual serious teacher applying for more, I guess, like legit jobs, in which case you needed a CELTA. That's kind of all there was. A couple of decades back, online courses weren't up to scratch. They weren't really accredited, recognised. So you did the CELTA, or, you were kind of maybe backpacking, and it used to be the case in certain parts of the world, you could kind of just turn up into a country and walk into a job, just if you were a native speaker. But things are a lot different now. You can't really do that anymore. There are visa requirements. Employers actually want people to be prepared. So yeah, I mean, the CELTA is obviously like a really good course. It's typically held over a month. It's an intensive course. You'll get practical experience with real English learners. But it's also expensive to do. So it's like, if you're not sure if you want to make a career out of TEFL, then, it's quite an investment. It's like Carl says, the CELTA, if you've done your TEFL qualification, you've gone off and taught for a while, and you've decided you want to make this a career, that you're serious about it, then consider the CELTA, because it can open a few more doors, mainly with the British Council, who still insist on teachers having a CELTA. But the truth is, like, most employers, 120-hour TEFL certificate, that's what they're looking for. As long as it's from an established, accredited provider, then you're going to be good to go.
There was something, in terms of qualifications, and you mentioned as well before the sort of backpacker culture of it. Now, I think, and again, we're going back to this kind of misconception I had before, but I'm going to link this all together in a way that I hopefully you wouldn't mark on Google Docs if it was an article saying, what are you talking about? It's, do you think the fact that there's more TEFL courses that are high quality, that are affordable, do you think that's leveled the playing field? Because, and forgive me if this is a sort of lower middle class chip on my shoulder thing, but I think what you were saying about people sort of turning up in random countries and hoping for work, there's a certain kind of luxury, attached to that. And I guess, it was low risk for people who were able to travel, money no expense anyway. But now, people get qualifications at home, they can do it online, and they can apply for jobs, and that makes the whole thing much more of a career, much more sustainable. Do you think, apart from the sort of academic and educational opportunities being more diverse, do you think that means that there's a more diverse range of teachers because there are more course options?
I think that's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think that the industry is definitely making progress in terms of the kind of issues with native speakerism. But I mean, there's still definitely a long way to go. There's certain parts of the world where, unless you've got a passport from like the UK, the US, Canada, native speaking countries, you can't get a visa to work there. But even within countries where you can, you still see job adverts asking for native speakers. And it's just not the case that you need to be a native speaker to teach English. There's, a lot of value to someone having, someone whose second language is English teaching it, because they have gone through that experience themselves. They know what it's like to learn a language. And I think as well, for teachers who are at the beginning of their career, if you've got somebody who is a native English speaker and someone who's a non-native English speaker, the non-native speaker is already going to have an advantage in terms of being able to understand how English grammar works, because most native speakers don't learn their own grammar. You know, you can't explain. What you can do is you can say when something sounds right and when something doesn't, but you don't really have the vocabulary or the understanding to explain why something is wrong. But, you know, non-native speakers have, you know, to begin with anyway, at that kind of stage, they've got an advantage, I think. But yeah, I guess like going back to your question, it's kind of a nice idea. I hope that's true.
There's another thing that I would have thought about TEFL in the past, that if let's say you were going to do a TEFL qualification, a CELTA, for example, there wasn't really, if you wanted to be a teacher, great, that was a vocation and you could do that for the rest of your life and happily do that. But what we've seen is that, especially in Series 2, is that it can just be the start of something, or there's ways of incorporating TEFL into other parts of your career they want to explore. I mean, Jennifer's obvious example became a TEFL teacher not long after university, and then ended up co-founding a TEFL course provider, the very one we work for, who we're speaking from. Carl, you know, the Delta, he works for himself. He does lots of different gigs, including the webinar series that is immensely popular. And of course, you know, Cheryl Obel, who's turned her TEFL experience into sort of training that she does, but also managed to combine a lot of the choreography work that she was doing, a lot of the sort of policy work. So I guess that's, you know, one thing. I mean, before I joined the TEFL industry, I had no idea about the scope of careers that were actually available. And I think I'm still learning a lot about the industry. But that was one of the things that really struck me, is that, you know, feeling the pull of the vocation teaching is a wonderful thing, and there are teachers within my own family. And it's wonderful, but there's also so many transferable skills and different things you can do. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people maybe aren't aware of, you know, the various different paths you can take. You just don't know where you might end up. It's a lot of people start off in TEFL because they want to travel, and maybe, you know, some of them have finished university, they don't know what they want to do. That's where they get into TEFL. That's absolutely fine, you know. Whatever reason people have for getting into it, it's valid. Yeah, it's not just something you do for like a year or two, and then you come home, have your serious career. It can be that if you want it to be, but there are so many different paths. You know, Jennifer, who co-founded the TEFL Org, you know, she started up a TEFL course provider. There's people who go on to start their own language schools. They go to work at universities. They, you know, start off by getting a 120-hour TEFL certificate that they gained online. They go away, they teach, they realise this is something they want to keep doing, so they get more qualifications. So you mentioned the Delta, which Carl did, and that's a diploma. So that's kind of your highest level, I suppose, TEFL qualification, apart from, you know, if you were doing like a master's or a PhD, which you can do. You know, you can go into the academic side of things and work at universities and work in research. Yeah, there's just so many different things that you can do. Different countries you can work in, different kinds of employers. So yeah, I think a lot of people would be surprised about, you know, the different paths that are there.
Okay, so we're going to take another quick break. After the break, Erin's going to absolutely expose my lack of knowledge of this season's guests by quoting episodes and asking me to identify who said it. We'll talk a little bit more about the contributors, and then we'll discuss our biggest takeaways from season 2.
Are you looking for a weekly guide to what's going on in the TEFL world? Do you want some advice on everything from job interviews to underrated TEFL destinations? Well, the TEFL Org blog has it all. Every single week, we tackle some of the biggest questions in the TEFL industry. Stay up to date with the latest trends in English teaching, find tips to make your next job application your best yet, or get inspired and read about the experiences of TEFL Org graduates teaching all around the world. Whether you're brand new to the industry, or you've seen it all, we can guarantee an interesting read each week. To find out more, go to tefl.org/blog. That's TEFL.org/blog.
Welcome back to our Season 2 recap. I'm still with Erin MacKenzie, who's about to test my knowledge of the season just past. And Erin, I'll fully admit I'm a little bit scared about this.
Yeah, you don't need to be. It's going to be fine, Euan. I wouldn't ask you anything mean or, try to make you look stupid. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I promise. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounded quite sarcastic. I didn't mean it. I'm not gonna. I promise. I'm not out to get you.
No, that's in fairness. I've given you so much proofreading to do recently. I wouldn't actually blame you. But no, go ahead. This will either be extremely painful or I'll surprise myself. It can only go two ways.
Okay, so very simple game. I'm going to read out a quote from a contributor, and then I'm going to ask you who said it.
Okay.
So a bit of a test of your memory.
Oh no.
So are you ready for your first one?
As ready as I'll ever be, Erin. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm going to give you an easy one to begin with.
Okay.
Easy one. Okay. So this contributor said, "It was the highest paid ESL job I ever had. Of course, tax-free. It allows you to save a lot. And you finally feel like you're being paid what you're worth." Who said that?
That's Cheryl talking about Saudi Arabia, I think.
That is. You're correct.
Yes, we're here. We're here. That was a really interesting episode because I think there were a few different kind of TEFL destinations where maybe they're kind of obvious ones, but at the same time, they're still really emergent markets. I mean, I'm not 100% sure myself what the interest in TEFL is in the Middle East, but I know there's a lot of international schools there. I had some cousins that went to an international school in Oman, and it was essentially bi or trilingual. But yeah, I mean, from your perspective, do you think there's been a growth there, or has there always been demand for English teachers?
Yeah, I think there's big demand in the Middle East, in your kind of oil-rich countries. The thing with the Middle East is that they look like they're very attractive positions because they pay a lot of money. And like Cheryl had said, it's tax-free, so you're taking home everything.
Yeah.
And the benefits tend to be great as well. But you do need to be, qualified. You need to have a degree. They might even ask for a master's. It's not a place where you're going to get work as an entry-level teacher, to be honest. You're looking at having like a couple of years of experience under your belt before you can realistically get a job. But yeah, I mean, they're very lucrative gigs to get for TEFL teachers. So yeah, for those that are, interested in that part of the world, looking to, make a good bit of money to either fund further travels or come home and put a deposit down on a house or whatever. Yeah, very attractive, which does mean there's competition for them as well.
Definitely. Okay, I think I'm ready for my next quote.
Okay, so next one. "It's very, very obvious when someone gives you a generic cover letter or CV that doesn't match the job you're advertising."
That's got to be Carl.
That is Carl.
And it actually points to a mistake I made, a non-TEFL mistake I made in my own career earlier in my life. Personalised cover letters and CVs are so important. They're so important. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're just throwing out the same thing to various people. And I think a portion of blame needs to be attributed to this generation of parents because they made job hunting sound like, oh, go get on your bike, throw some CVs around. It's no longer like that, no matter what you do. Yeah. So I'm not blaming my parents specifically, of course, I'm not. But I think there is definitely a culture of that doesn't really quite understand how the job market looks now. Yeah. You've known Carl much longer than I have, of course. Just a really interesting guy, just a really lovely guy. How long have you sort of worked with Carl?
Well, I mean, I guess like for 6 years now, but the first time I properly met Carl was I want to say like maybe 2018. We had a tutor conference held in Glasgow, and lots of our tutors came along, and it was a great chance to meet them. So that I first met Carl that way, and then just through the webinars. So Alan typically moderates them, but if he's off, then I'll fill in. So it's always nice to to see Carl and have a wee chat. But yeah, he's just like full of so much like useful information. He's a great person to be doing these webinars. I've learned so much from him, and I think like so many other people have. But I think that he's got so much experience in recruitment, and I think it's just like, it's such important information, because you see it time and time again, people saying that they're not hearing back, they're applying for TEFL jobs, they're not hearing back, and then usually it turns out because there's issues with their applications, they're firing off generic stuff. And I know from, you know, my own experience doing recruitment, you just, you know, if someone isn't going to bother kind of tailoring something, it's like, well, are you really interested in this job? Do you really want this job? So it just, yeah, it's a bad impression from the start. So very useful advice. And for anyone who's in that position where they're starting to apply for jobs or thinking about it, we'd recommend going onto our YouTube channel and looking up the previous webinars we've ran, because Carl's done loads of stuff about applying for TEFL jobs.
Mm-hmm. And there's stuff in there that's not just, I mean, obviously it's geared towards TEFL, but I think there's stuff that anyone could pick up there, especially in terms of, you know, finding work and creating opportunities for yourself. Talking to Carl, one of the wildest bits in the whole 2 series is him talking about his experiences in Iraq, because for obvious reasons, not a place where I thought you'd do TEFL, but there's a bit where he's talking about being in a taxi and Tony Blair's name comes up. Now, there are there are 8 billion odd people I would bring up in a taxi in Iraq before I would say Tony Blair. So goodness me, I can't imagine how stressful that was. But he's particularly great, I think, at pointing to corners of the world that are really underrepresented, that people don't necessarily think to go to teach, but has, you know, these places have just as much charm, as much opportunity, as much, you know, of a reason to go there as anywhere else, really. So yeah, I think it was great having him on.
It's really about, you know, what you want from your TEFL experience. If you want, you know, a lot of support, or maybe, you know, kind of like your home comforts, then go somewhere that's going to give you that. Big cities and, you know, like places like Tokyo or, you know, in Europe that might feel like a bit familiar, be able to offer you those home comforts. But, you know, there are plenty of people out there who are looking for like a real adventure. And I think it was Carl who he said about he'd kind of set a rule for himself that if he started to feel too comfortable in one place, then it was time to move on, because he just wanted to get out there and see the world. And yeah, there's obviously like huge demand for teachers in certain parts of the world, more demand in some countries than there is in others, but there are jobs everywhere, really. So yeah, I think it's great hearing, you know, about these places that Carl's been to, and kind of realising that, you know, if you have that sense of adventure, then, you know, you can do the same.
Yeah. Talking of comfort, I mean, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because since I turned 30, my favourite activity has been being comfortable. I've got really into like sitting down. I've become a blanket guy. Like, it's all, I can totally respect it, but I maybe I'm not the most empathetic person on that front. So quote number 3.
Quote number 3. Don't worry about being new. I think a lot of people like the fact that you're new. They like the fact that you're fresh and coming in with energy.
I'm going to guess that's Ellie.
That is Ellie.
Yes! 3 for 3.
Yeah.
Ellie was such a cool guest. So the story with that one is, you know, sometimes we find podcast guests amongst the people who have contributed us to our blog or to our content in some way. Ellie was one of those people. She had done some Instagram content for us and just seemed to be living a really, really exciting life in Japan, in Kyoto specifically, which isn't necessarily everyone's kind of number one go-to city in Japan. So it was just really, really cool speaking to her. And another one of these examples of, you know, COVID changed her plans. So she said, well, what have I always wanted to do? And there was a bit in there about she never thought she could be a teacher. She didn't think she'd be able to do a qualification to be a teacher even. And it's just so great seeing someone, you know, kind of flourish in something that they thought was a bit impossible for them. I think, Erin, I'm sure you'll agree, it was kind of impossible not to take a bit of inspiration from that episode.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always good to hear from these teachers who, you know, are very new to the whole thing. I mean, I think, 2 years she's been out there. And and realizing that, it just makes it seem like all, way more doable, I guess, for people listening, because, Ellie, she'd worked with kids before when she was working for cruise ships, but, she wasn't a teacher. She didn't have that experience, but she was talking a lot about how there's such a demand for teachers out there, and it's growing as well. So basically, if you've got the qualifications and you've got the enthusiasm to do it, then you're gonna get a job. There's work for you there, and just because you've not done it before, that doesn't mean it. That doesn't count against you. There are a lot of employers who are specifically looking for that, because with a new teacher, they can mold that teacher. So I think people who are worried about their, what they think is like a lack of experience, I don't think they need to be worried. And I think, Ellie's kind of case in point.
Yeah, I've always wondered that with the whole experience thing, because I do, to a degree, understand that there are certain roles where you're going to need a veteran teacher, someone who's kind of been there and done it, but at the same time, you don't get to that point without having been a rookie teacher yourself. So, it does surprise me that, especially with new teachers, to say like, oh, well, I don't have experience, I'm not going to be able to find a job anywhere. It's like, well, no, everyone had to start somewhere. And, starting somewhere that also happens to be where you've dreamt about living throughout your whole teens is kind of incredible. I live in Glasgow now, so I can understand what that feels like.
Don't talk about Glasgow like that.
No, I love it. So quote number 4, please, Erin.
Quote number 4. Okay. Unlike Korea, they don't have the split schedule. Some people really don't like the split schedule at all. I didn't mind it. I actually kind of like going in early in the morning and then having 7 or 8 hours in between to do whatever I wanted.
I'm going to guess Arthur here.
It is Arthur, yeah.
Yes! And honestly, I thought I'd be so rubbish at this. Yeah, Arthur is... getting his episode done was really great. Just a really cool and genuine guy. And really forthcoming with his experiences as well. There's a lot of stuff in there. It sort of touched on mental health a wee bit, and about, to an extent, with the work he was doing with, community work he was doing, those sort of themes of poverty, of financial hardship, both in his own life and in the lives of people that he was trying to help. It was a real... I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but it was a real kind of snapshot of what the Northwest of America was like during the start and the sort of middle of the global banking crisis. And the fact that he years later was in a podcast talking about what he's done since then obviously shows that he made all the right moves. But behind the scenes, bit of an exclusive here. We recorded that episode, or tried to record that episode 4 times. And due to all manners of technical issues, we got there in the end, thank goodness. But I can't explain how grateful I am for him giving his time. So tell me about Arthur, because you were very early on an advocate for getting Arthur on the podcast. What's been your experience with him?
So Arthur, I can't remember when Arthur started as a tutor. I feel like it might have been 2018, 2019. So I actually met him out in New York in beginning of 2019, I think it was, where he was he was running our in-person classes there. I think just like he's been to a lot of interesting places. He's an interesting guy, and I think it was a big relief when we finally managed to get that episode recorded. It seemed like there was a bit of a curse maybe going on there. Was there not a storm or something? Was that not one reason for one of the episodes not being like there was a bad storm in Vietnam?
It was a typhoon, I believe, which I only really know as a type of... I only really know that as a brand of tea, but it's it was a real life thing. So we tried recording through it, but the rain was so heavy that you could hear it above everything else, and it obviously is going to interfere with the internet connection. But I didn't realize that Arthur, he moved to Oregon later in life. I didn't realize that he wasn't from there, and so I had all these like Portland themed questions lined up for him as a sort of fun Q&A towards the end, but I just had to bin them all because he was just like, no, I'm not originally from Portland. So I had to throw out questions about some certain bands and basketball players. But maybe I can use them later on for someone else. We'll see. But yeah, really, really cool guy. Love speaking to him, and owe him a debt of gratitude for all of his patience with me, to be honest. But aye.
Okay, I think I've got one more for you.
Okay.
Let's see if you can get, what is that, 6 out of 6 it'll be. As an industry, there are cowboy/Mickey Mouse companies that get set up, so you have to differentiate yourself from that.
Oh, it's Jennifer.
That is Jennifer. Congratulations, you got all of them. You had nothing to worry about.
Yay! Well, I mean, in my life or this? No, yeah, Jennifer, it was great speaking to Jennifer, because I like speaking to Jennifer anyway. Yeah, just a really, really cool lady. So determined and forthright, but also like really personable, and you can understand why she does sort of ambassadorship, because you would want to learn from her. I think if you were, especially if you're a young woman in Scottish business, you would absolutely want to learn from her. So what were let's go all the way back here. What were your first impressions of Jennifer meeting her for the first time? Because I can imagine she's just been an absolute like delight to speak to the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, so the first time I met Jennifer, so obviously Jennifer and Joe founded the company, and yeah, in 2010 when I started working, they had this tiny little office. It was 2 rooms that were just full of like cardboard boxes. Like you just had to like climb over stuff to get to like a desk. It was really cramped. They were doing a lot from this very small space. So yeah, I mean, it grew like really quickly. It's kind of amazing that, we're 13 years on, which kind of sounds insane to say now, just thinking about my own age. but yeah, to think about then and now and like all that both Jennifer and Joe have kind of accomplished in that time, I think it's really impressive. The company's always kind of gone from strength to strength, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it's funny like thinking back to then, because I mean, I used to babysit Joe and Jennifer's kids, and they're now like adults. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. See, remember, Erin, you're still younger than I am, so you're not allowed to complain too much about growing old. But yeah, it is weird, isn't it? And it's cool now. I'm just sort of wondering like how we top that for ending, series 3, because we've got both the co-founders in now. So I don't know. It was also quite funny hearing Jennifer contradict some of Joe's recollections of it. I think that's to be expected, though. They're both really funny.
Yeah, they've got like so much experience between them. They've done so many different things, been in different countries. So, yeah, it makes sense that you might remember things a bit differently.
Mm-hmm. I'd say the only edge that Joe's episode had over Jennifer's episode is that Joe was on a boat at the time.
Yeah.
Which shows you how far we've come technologically, that we can record a podcast on a boat and I can edit out a lot of the really harsh wind noises.
Yeah, I think like maybe in the contributor's guide for future episodes, maybe open air spaces like boats are discouraged.
Yeah, typhoons are banned as well.
Yeah.
So let's start to wrap this up a wee bit. As both a producer and a listener of this, and obviously of both series, what were your biggest takeaways from this season, especially compared to kind of the first one? Was there anything that really struck you this time around?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like similar to what I said before about, hearing the sort of like diverse experiences and backgrounds that people have come from. It's just not really inspiring. And I think, when I think about, the work I'm doing on a kind of day-to-day basis, it's just quite nice to hear these things, to hear, about how TEFL has changed people's lives. And, that's not, being like hyperbolic, it does change people's lives. It opens up so many opportunities. It gives them a chance to experience the world and in a way that would be very difficult to do otherwise. And I think it just like, yeah, it makes you kind of feel like what you're doing has kind of some value, that, you're helping in some way. these people you're helping these people to achieve these things and, you know, learn new things about themselves, have different experiences. And yeah, it's, yeah, I think that's what really kind of struck me while I was listening to each episode was, you know, this is a great thing for people to be able to do, and it's very exciting, and it's nice to be some small part of that, I guess.
It is. No, you're bang on though, because I think we're obviously from the sort of content and marketing kind of side of things. We're not as front facing and you know, as sales are, but it's cool to think about how something you've done has had this knock-on effect of making someone interested in this career that can literally take you anywhere. And could lead to all sorts of different experiences. You know, I mean, take for example Carl. Obviously, you know, he didn't he didn't start his career because of something one of us wrote in a blog, but he. Just for an example, you know, he met his wife out, you know, while working as English teachers. Arthur did too. I'm sure the new teachers that are coming through are going to meet all sorts of significant people in their life, you know, while they're out teaching, and it's pretty wild how seemingly little things like, you know, a guide to teaching in a certain country can lead someone to completely change their life. You know, sign up for a TEFL course, head out to somewhere completely new. And just have all these amazing experiences. It's really inspiring. I think, you know, not that I struggle for motivation anyway, but I think listening to these podcasts sort of makes you realize what it's all for, and you know, it keeps you going whenever you're writing or editing something, because you know it's going to have an effect on someone, and hopefully the podcast does too, without being too self-congratulatory.
Yeah, I mean, I always think, you know, in terms of marketing in general, I feel like I would find it really, really hard to try selling something that I don't believe in. I think it feels really important to me that, you know, what we're selling, and also the idea of what we're selling has like actual value. And also, yeah, just knowing like the amount of work that's gone into developing the courses that we offer, knowing that those are, you know, offer really good quality, and like the tutors who, you know, work supporting the students through their courses, like really do care about the level of, you know, support they're offering and their advice, and they're in it because they want people to have this experience that they've had as well. There's that real enthusiasm that you can get from talking to any of our tutors. And yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, so let's talk about plans for Series 3. Now, obviously with this next season, we can't give away too much, mainly because a lot of it we don't know yet, but there's a very good chance that some of the recording will be on location. Hopefully you'll find out where later in the year. But yeah, is there anything you'd like to see in particular for the next season of I Taught English Abroad? And, you know, what kind of... Can we, for example, record some of it on a barge? Could we record some of it? Just trying to think of where the worst outside noise would be.
Yeah, on a wind farm.
On a motorway? At a wind farm, yeah. It'd be picturesque for sure, but it wouldn't be... Yeah, so what are you thinking for season 3 then, as a producer of all this?
I think I'm really interested in hearing from people who've been in countries that we've not covered yet. So I think I really enjoyed Carl's episode, because hearing, you know, from someone who's taught in countries that, you know, you don't often come across teachers who've taught in the places that he's taught. So yeah, these kind of like, I guess, less popular places, it'd be great to kind of hear about those kind of real life experiences. But yeah, I'm trying to think what country in particular. I'd love to hear more from teachers who've been out in Latin America. Because I think, there's real growing demand there. There's a lot of opportunity there. So it'd be great to hear from people who've, been out in that part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Such an underrated part of the world as well. I'd love to go. So I guess we're going to use this final bit of the podcast to, first of all, thank Erin for joining me. I hope it's not been too horrible. And you're more, you know, I know you're my boss, but please do have a 5-10 minute sit after this, because recording podcasts is surprisingly exhausting. But also, I without speaking for both of us, it'd be great to first of all thank everyone who's listened so far. Anyone who's left a review, or anyone who's even told anyone to listen to the podcast, it really does mean a lot. And if you think you're particularly interesting and have a good story or two about teaching English abroad, please do get in touch with us. You can do that through any of our social channels. So what are they nowadays, Erin? There's Instagram, there's Twitter, Facebook, is it TikTok? Do we have TikTok? I'm sure we've got TikTok.
Yeah, we are on TikTok, we're on LinkedIn, we're on all the major social platforms, all the same handle, which should be TEFL Org. Cool.
Bebo, MySpace, Friendster.
Yeah, we're bringing Bebo back.
Exactly.
That's what the people want.
God, that'd be a nightmare. But yeah, we're really excited to hear some more stories, so please do get in touch with us, and we'll keep you updated with everything that's going to happen in season 3. But until then, keep checking out the TEFL Org's blog and everything that we've got going on the site. But Erin, I'm going to leave the last words to you. If you like, you can finish off this podcast by telling the people whatever you like.
Whatever I like.
Whatever you like.
Well, no,
it's your soapbox.
No, just thanks very much, Euan, for having me on, for making my first ever podcast experience very pleasant. It was a lot less nerve-wracking than I thought it might be. So, it's been lovely.
Cool. Well, it's an editing trick to record the whole thing word for word, but backwards. So we're going to do that in about 5-10 minutes, just so we've got a good double. That's going to be much more nerve-wracking.
Great.
But
I've got a meeting, so I think I might have to cut this.
Right. Well, no, that's fine. I'm sure you can stay beyond 6. That's probably going to be okay. Anyway, Erin, it's been lovely chatting to you. Thanks so much for coming on, and I'm sure we'll do another one of these in the future.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Euan. You've been listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast series by the TEFL Org. To keep up to date with every episode, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your streaming platform of choice. And we love feedback, so feel free to leave us a review on any platform you like. For more information about the TEFL Org, or about teaching English as a foreign language in general, head on over to TEFL.org. That's TEFL.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. You've been listening to I Taught English Abroad, a podcast series by the TEFL Org. To keep up to date with every episode, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your streaming platform of choice. And we love feedback, so feel free to leave us a review on any platform you like. For more information about the TEFL Org, or about teaching English as a foreign language in general, head on over to TEFL.org. That's TEFL.org. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.